Women who gave the creep a chance, how did it go? Story 1. The unsettling behavior was, mostly, before the date. I was working a temporary bartending position while the usual bartender, a friend, was on unpaid maternity leave. It was a small, casual neighborhood bar. In addition to uncomfortable jokes and comments, there was an incident where he offered to wait and walk me to my car, and I declined. However, I still found him waiting in the shadows as I walked out. That night, he almost found out what it's like to deal with personal protection. He claimed he was just worried because he saw some shady people outside when he left. Do I know if that was his real motive? Not entirely. I questioned his intentions but gave him the benefit of the doubt. I asked my friend about him, and she said he fell into the weird but harmless category. After talking with him over the few weeks I was at the job, I took him as someone with poor social skills, but not a bad person. I think his uncomfortable vibe came from that lack of social skills. He needed to work on not trying to act cool or tough with his comments because it added to the uneasiness for sure. I agreed to the date on my last shift at that bar, figuring if it went badly, he didn't know where I usually worked. I made sure to drive myself and had friends on standby in case I needed help. Story 2. Met him while I worked as a cashier in a small downtown shop. He wasn't my type and seemed a little off, but I was young and had zero real dating experience. I agreed to grab coffee as a friend and made it clear I wasn't interested in anything romantic. He became convinced he was Gatsby and I was his Daisy. The Great Gatsby film had just come out that year. He started obsessively sending letters and gifts to me at work, describing how we were destined to be together. When I confronted him, asking him to stop, he had his friends check up on me at work. He also lurked outside when I had to close the shop alone. I ended up quitting that job and the situation died down. 7 months later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the same guy. He had just been released from a short stint and wanted to let me know that he thought about me every day and was determined to find me so we could be together. I made up a story that I was traveling abroad for college and would be gone for a long time. Changed my number and luckily haven't heard from him again. Story 3. I'll share the rare success story, not with me, but not as bad as the others. He was sort of strange and quirky, and we hung out and flirted because I didn't want to seem shallow and didn't know how to set boundaries, but I wasn't really interested. Eventually, I just stopped engaging and sending signals. Apparently, he made a couple of rude comments to mutual friends about how I don't date monomuggles, monogamous people anyway, which was quite a rude thing to say. A few years later, I saw him at an event and he waved me down. I was nervous, but he said, "Hey, I wanted to apologize. I was really rude to you and your friends. I've worked on myself and realized that women not liking me isn't their issue. It's mine." I forgave him, and we hung out a few times at events after that. Good guy, just going through an awkward phase back then. Story 4. This guy was attractive but way too invested in me without knowing anything about me. It wasn't like I was an open book or felt a strong connection that would make me want to share a lot with him. It wasn't the kind of, I feel like I've known this person forever connection. I thought it was just typical dating. But something felt off. He talked to me like I had been his girlfriend for months. We went on 3 dates, never even got close to anything intimate. After the 3rd date, I made my decision based on the little time we spent together and told him I didn't see us as compatible in the long term. He then locked me in his car, asked if I wanted to move to California with him, seriously, and started crying and begging me to work things out. I tried to be as kind as possible, but it got to the point where I was genuinely scared because I didn't know how it would go, given that he was practically a stranger. So I knocked on the dashboard and said if he didn't let me out immediately, I was calling for help. He then threatened to harm himself if I didn't spend the night at his house. I had never even been to his house. He finally let me out after what felt like forever, but he stayed outside my apartment almost the whole night, calling me nonstop. About a month later, he texted me a long message, apologizing profusely and saying if I ever changed my mind to call him. I just said thanks for the apology and wished him well. I hope he's doing better, but I want no part in that situation. Story 5. The guy in the flat across from mine started off as a really nice person. He introduced himself, offered meals when he made too much food. Just an all-around good guy. Within a few weeks, it became clear that he had issues with alcohol. I have a recovering brother, so I felt for him. I went out of my way to sit with him and eventually called for help when he had episodes from withdrawal. In the UK, this is free. This went on for a while, with me waiting with him 2 or 3 times a week for assistance. One night, after he had another episode, he kept inappropriately touching me. I was already on the phone with emergency services, but the dispatcher overheard me telling him to stop and sent the police as well. He was taken away, and as usual, I held onto his keys and told him to collect them the next morning. The next time I checked in on him, his inappropriate behavior escalated. Then my life started to spiral. Suddenly, fires were being set outside my windows, and I found disturbing things left at my doorstep. The authorities were called after every incident, and I got to know one officer quite well. He suggested I install cameras, so I did. The footage showed my neighbor standing outside in the yard at 3 a.m., just staring into my window multiple nights in a row. Terrifying, but apparently not illegal. 2 weeks after that, he snapped. There were builders next door, and apparently they woke him up at 4 p.m. He ran outside with a knife and injured 2 of the builders and the neighbor's dog. Everyone survived. He also slashed several tires on our street. When the police searched his flat, the officer I had gotten to know told me, off the record, that the neighbor had been faking his alcohol problem the whole time. He'd get in the ambulance, ride to the hospital, then check himself out and walk home. They also found half a dozen decaying animals in his bathtub, which had been mistreated. They later found a tool used in the attacks under his bed. You'd think him being arrested would be the end of it, but no. He put my name, picture, address, and phone number on a suspicious website. I had people harassing me multiple times an hour for 2 whole weeks before I cut all ties and fled the city. Last I heard, he was in jail for the assaults, but that was a few years ago now. Story 6. Back in high school, several of my female friends and I, also female, had a break period before lunch, so we were all sitting around a table chatting. One of the female security guards came up to us and told me there was a new exchange student from Amsterdam who thought I was cute, but he was too nervous to introduce himself. I wasn't interested in men, but I figured there was no harm in letting the guy come sit with us and helping him feel more comfortable at our school. He came over, sat down, and started chatting with us. He seemed pretty shy, and he had about a dozen piercings going up each arm that he kept fiddling with, and a bunch of facial piercings. After a while, class let out, and some of my male friends started showing up for lunch. The first male friend sat down and introduced himself, but the new guy didn't respond at all. Didn't even look at him. It was strange. Maybe he was just shy. Then a second male friend sat down. The same thing happened. By now, it felt pretty unsettling. We kept trying to include him in the conversation, but he would only respond to the women at the table, completely ignoring the guys. I never spoke to him again after that lunch, and 2 weeks later, he got expelled for pushing a girl against a locker and hurting her so badly that she almost passed out. Story 7. A few years ago, I went to a brewery to meet a guy for a first date. The waiter started chatting with me and asked if I was expecting anyone. I told him I was on a blind date and hadn't met the guy before. The waiter asked if I wanted to set up a code word just in case. Since they didn't serve milk stouts, he said if I ordered one, he'd know something was wrong and would come get me under the pretense of signing a receipt. The waiter kept checking on me regularly. Eventually, I did order a milk stout. When it came time to split the bill, my date added his drinks to my tab. When the waiter came back, he told me the drinks had been taken care of and were on the house. My date asked what that was about, and I told him the waiter mentioned something was wrong with my card and I had to go to the bar. I waited a while, then left for my car. My date stayed behind and made a comment about waiting for a goodbye hug. I told him no thanks, my car was in the opposite direction. Moments later, he sent me some awful text messages. Story 8. I went on a first date with a guy, and the red flags appeared immediately. He didn't look anything like his profile picture and got too familiar almost as soon as we sat down. I wasn't interested, but we had a shared interest in horror novels. So I decided to extend the date into dinner. During dinner, he drank several cocktails while I barely finished my one beer. He then told me that we were soulmates and that we were destined to fall in love. He also mentioned that his ex was going through a tough situation the next day. At the end of the date, his portion of the bill was much higher than mine due to all his drinks, but he asked me to split it, which I did. On top of that, he criticized me for driving to the date, even though it was just a mile from my house. I didn't want to walk in the heat since I was wearing a nice outfit and had twisted my ankle earlier that week. Despite that, he still asked for a ride home, which I gave him. Once we got to his place, he refused to get out of the car unless I went inside with him for a drink. I said absolutely not. He begged me to join him on the front porch. I refused again and told him to get out. He finally did. The next day he texted me, saying it was the best date he'd ever had and that he couldn't wait to see me again. I declined, and that was the last I saw of him. The lesson learned: I need to trust my gut and say no from the beginning. Story 9. He had terrible hygiene. I was 16, and he was old enough to buy drinks for my friends. He had a friend who was part of some pretend group and threatened me if I ever tried to break up with him. I stayed with him longer than I should have. He would follow me to school on the bus and then walk around acting strangely in public. I tried to break up with him, and he bought me cartoon-themed jewelry and insisted we were engaged. He eventually had to leave town for some family matters and stayed away for months, so I considered us broken up and moved on. When he came back, he acted erratically. He would come to my job, follow me around, and try to trap me in the bathroom. His dad was a high-ranking official at a university and knew I was 16. My parents also knew about the relationship, and I feel like someone should have intervened to help me out of that situation. Story 10. There was a guy who used to come into the restaurant where I worked for lunch several times a week. He did this for over a month, so he became a regular. Every time I brought him his bill, he would ask me out, but in a lighthearted way. He never seemed upset when I turned him down, and I started to think maybe it was just a joke at that point. He always gave me a strange vibe, but he seemed nice enough, so I thought maybe I was being unfair and assuming things because of his appearance. One day, I randomly agreed to go out with him. I thought, why not? He was always kind and seemed harmless. I asked him to leave his number on the receipt, and I told him I would text him when I wasn't busy to set something up. A few days passed, and I hadn't reached out yet. When I got home from work one night, I received a text from him saying, "Hey, I know it's a long shot, but I'm free tonight. Want to hang out? If you're free, that is." I asked him how he got my number. He said I gave it to him the night I agreed to the date. I knew I hadn't. I got really uncomfortable, but decided not to confront him about it. I played it off, pretending I must have forgotten because it was a busy night. I told him I wasn't free to hang out because I was covering a shift, and then I would be too tired. A few minutes later, he responded with, "Why are you lying to me?" I replied, "What? LOL. He said, "I know you're home. If you didn't want to hang out, you could have just said so." Alarm bells went off. I thought there was no way he was outside my house. He was probably just trying to call my bluff. But I felt uneasy, like someone was watching me. I looked out through the blinds and he was parked outside my house, his face lit up by his phone screen. He was so close. I texted him, playing it cool, saying, "Haha, you caught me. How did you know? I'm sorry. I do want to hang out soon, just not tonight." And then called the police. The police arrived and spoke to him for a bit. He drove away, and the officers came to my door, telling me they made it seem like a random neighbor had complained about a strange car, so he didn't know I was involved. They took his information and asked him to move along. I stayed at a friend's house that night and filed a restraining order the next day. I later found out he probably got my number from the shift sheet behind the hostess counter. Several coworkers had seen him snooping back there at different times, but they thought he was just grabbing something small to avoid bothering us during a busy time. Apparently, he had been parked outside my house almost every night, which a neighbor's security camera caught. I'm not sure how he found out where I lived, but he may have followed me. He came back to the restaurant a couple of days later, acting like everything was normal. I immediately got my manager, and she informed him that he had a restraining order preventing him from returning. I changed my phone number and didn't sleep at my house for weeks. I never saw him again. Sometimes I think about that time and wonder how much more he did and for how long I didn't know. Maybe he was stalking me long before he started coming into the restaurant. I've never felt comfortable being alone since. Most of this would have still happened even if I hadn't given him a chance. But if he hadn't slipped up about having my phone number, I probably would have gone out with him. And who knows how that could have ended. Story 11. I ignored my gut feeling about him, overlooked his strange behaviors, and tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. We were together for almost 2 years. Throughout the relationship, he would add girls he didn't even know on Snapchat and say highly inappropriate things to them. Knowing now what I didn't know then, one of the girls was underage. He was 26. On my 22nd birthday, he invited my best friend to sleep in our bed with us. And the first time he met my sister, he extended the same invitation. Both of these invitations were given right in front of me. Whenever we were out together, if he saw someone attractive, he wouldn't just glance. He would openly stare. He often criticized my family and was, in general, a pretty terrible person. I was his first real girlfriend, and he was extremely self-centered and emotionally manipulative. That ended almost a year ago, but he still frequents our usual hangout spots, asking about me when I come in, where I'm living, and who I'm seeing. My biggest takeaway from that whole situation is to always trust your instincts about people. Story 12. In high school during my senior year, I decided to befriend a kid at lunch who was an outcast. He was the classic leather jacket wearing, headphones blasting type, and I was more of an artsy kid who managed to get along with most people. My friends were diverse, so they gave this guy a chance because I did. However, my friends quickly realized how strange and unsettling he could be. They soon stopped engaging with him and moved to a different table. I tried to split my time between him and the larger group, but as the year went on, I became more involved with the main group, especially since many of us shared final classes and extracurriculars. I kept trying to chat with him in the hallways, but he either wouldn't respond or was short with me. I figured he was upset about the change, so I gave him space. He didn't take it well. One day I was at my locker when he stormed up to me with a glass bottle of soda. I distinctly remember it because he would chew tobacco and spit into the same bottle he drank from. When I asked him about it once, he said, "What does it matter? It's all going in the same place," and took a sip. With that bottle in hand, looking furious, he threw it in my direction and it shattered on the floor. He started yelling about how terrible I was, calling me a traitor and accusing me of being stuck up like my perfect friends. He pounded on the lockers, making them rattle. Thankfully, the track coach saw what was happening and came over to intervene. Before leaving, the guy told me to watch my back. For the rest of senior year, I was constantly on edge, avoiding him whenever I saw him. I vaguely remember seeing him at graduation, but I haven't seen him since, even though we still live in the same city. I don't give people like that a chance anymore. Once was enough. Story 13. We worked together, and although I wasn't really into him, I decided to give him a chance because I wasn't dating anyone else at the time. I did have a small crush on another coworker in a somewhat supervisory role, so I figured it was better to move on from that. We went on one date. We met, talked, walked around, and hugged at the end. No kissing. We agreed to keep it between us because I didn't want work drama. His response? He told most of our coworkers and left a letter on my car, telling me how he could see our future. Marriage, kids, growing old together. But hey, there's a silver lining. He told that coworker I had a crush on, and it turned out my crush wasn't one-sided. That coworker made a move, and now I shouldn't call him my crush anymore. He's my husband. I ghosted the other guy, and it was a good decision. He ended up trying the same thing with every other woman in the store. Story 14. There was a guy I wasn't sure about. There had been some warning signs, but after a couple of regular dates, he suggested taking my Jeep to a local off-road spot. The area had a main, bumpy road with lots of side trails featuring hills and mud pits. He kept insisting on driving my Jeep. I told him he could only take it down the main road. While we were navigating the bumpy terrain, he suddenly veered off the main road and gunned it up a steep hill, causing us to roll into a ditch. The Jeep ended up on its side, and we were stuck with no way to get it out. He acted like it wasn't a big deal. I had to walk to my uncle's house, which was nearby. My uncle wasn't home, but his girlfriend was. I called a few people, but nobody was available to help. As a last resort, I called a childhood friend, a guy, who had a vehicle that could potentially pull the Jeep out. The guy I was with had no ideas besides leaving it there on its side. He threw a fit and made a scene. Meanwhile, my friend helped pull the dents out and fix the Jeep, while the other guys stormed off into the distance. Story 15. I was going through a messy divorce, mainly because my ex-husband had drained my bank account for the second time and left me with all the bills for our apartment and insurance. He kept a key to the apartment for months, and every day I would find small things missing, nothing major, just petty items. One day after work, I decided to stop by a store to buy something non-essential and ended up meeting my future husband. At first, I thought he was creepy because he overheard a conversation I was having while checking out. I almost bought some candy, but it was overpriced, and I knew I could get the same thing cheaper at a store across the street. Unbeknownst to me, he bought the candy and followed me to the next store. I had this strange feeling of being followed, and when I turned around, there he was, sprinting toward me with the candy I didn't want to buy. As strange as that encounter was, it turned out to be a rare instance of someone who genuinely had good intentions. We ended up talking for 2 hours in the parking lot, mostly me venting about my life. We hit it off right away, discussing things like kids and marriage, and 5 years later, we're married with a child. I just want to emphasize that this is a rare exception. If someone gives you an unsettling feeling, it's usually a sign to take seriously. I just got incredibly lucky that this person was kind and caring, looking for the same kind of family life that I was. Story 16. The most memorable moments were him saying, "I love you," the day we became official, pressuring me into having my first kiss with him, and telling me that his pastor said I would be the one he married. After the breakup, I thought we could still be friends. However, he seemed to enjoy making me feel bad for moving on. He took me to his junior prom and tried to kiss me afterward, even though I just wanted to get in the car and go home. He got jealous of a guy friend who came to see me graduate from high school because that friend was the main person I wanted to talk to. I hadn't seen him in years. Every gift or favor always felt like it came with an expectation that he was trying to win me back. Nothing ever felt genuine. He even kept trying after I went to college. The last time was when he visited me, brought a book for my birthday, and got upset when I told him I was seeing someone else. There's a lot more to the story, but in short, I kept giving him chances because I thought he'd move on and we could be friends. Instead, I ended up emotionally scarred. Even though I now live across the country, I still worry that he might somehow pop back into my life. Story 20. He was the drinks waiter at a restaurant I'd been going to with my family for special occasions since I was 16. On my 21st birthday, my flatmate, who was a little tipsy, gave him my number. We went on a date and met at my apartment complex. He bought flowers and chocolates for both me and my flatmate as a thank you. So now he knew where I lived. This will matter later. A week after my birthday, we went on our date. He told me to order whatever I wanted. I ordered a pizza for us to share, but it had something on it he couldn't eat due to religious beliefs. I felt awkward, but he could have mentioned that earlier when I was choosing. Anyway, I ended up eating the whole pizza since he couldn't. Then he insisted on ordering dessert. I was so full and said I couldn't, but he kept pushing, and I finally gave in. The restaurant brought out a dessert with a candle singing, "Happy Birthday." It was sweet, but our conversation felt a bit forced. After the date, he walked me back to my apartment complex. We said goodnight with a hug and a kiss on the cheek. 10 minutes later, I heard a knock on my door. It was him. He said he'd forgotten something and stared into my apartment. Then he looked me in the eye and said, "It's you." He pushed me up against the door and tried to kiss me, then said, "I love you." This was our first date. I managed to say, "Big words, you should go." He left. The next night, I was sitting on my balcony when the buzzer rang. I looked down, and it was him, drunk. He apologized for proposing, but said we'd known each other for so long, and he had been waiting for this day since we first met. I told him he was drunk and needed to leave. I texted him, making it clear I wasn't interested. He kept showing up at my apartment complex, drunk, despite me telling him repeatedly to stop. One night, I came home in the dark, and he emerged from the shadows. I panicked, dropped my keys, and felt like I was in actual danger, even though in hindsight I probably wasn't. I went inside, calmed down, and then went outside to confront him, yelling about how he had no right to show up unannounced and that if he ever came near me again, I would call the police. He responded, "Friends don't always have to call ahead." I shouted back that we weren't friends, and he needed to leave, or I'd call the cops. Needless to say, we don't go to that restaurant anymore. It used to be my favorite. Story 21. The first time I had him over, I fell asleep, and when I woke up, he was trying to get under my bra. I played it off, sent him home, and told him I wasn't interested. We didn't talk for months. Then for some reason, I gave him another chance. We dated on and off for a couple of years, and it was awful. He was completely clueless about how his actions affected others. He told me I had no right to get upset about the things he did. He also said certain things were gross, and I should feel lucky he even put in minimal effort, despite me giving him feedback, which he didn't appreciate. He applied for a job out of state and just assumed I would come with him if he got it, without even discussing it with me. He constantly complained about money, even though he made as much as I did, but had far lower living expenses. He also canceled trips with me so he could go with his friends instead. After we broke up, he sent me inappropriate images and even offered to meet up, knowing I was seeing someone else. To this day, I can't figure out why I dated him. Story 22. Midway through our date, where nothing had happened yet, we were walking from dinner to a nearby all-ages bar. He suddenly pushed me into a darkened area between two buildings, not quite an alley, shoved his mouth hard against mine, and grabbed me inappropriately. Both actions physically hurt. He then said he knew I wanted him because I was always smiling at him. I tried to push him away, but he forced his tongue into my mouth, gagging me before his lips even touched mine. When I finally got him off me, he couldn't understand why I didn't want him. He got super angry, yelling at me about how I was a tease and not worth his time. I saw actual rage in his eyes. For the next few months, I saw him twice a week, and every time my heart would stop. I gave him a wide berth because I had no idea what he was capable of. He hurt me in just 30 seconds, not even realizing how bad it was. I couldn't imagine what he'd do if he ever thought I deserved worse. Thankfully, nothing more happened, but it took me a long time to stop being afraid, even after I stopped seeing him around. It was a scary experience for a naive teenager, and it took me about a year before I was ready to date again. Story 23. She was a freshman, and I was a year ahead. She was so amazing in every way, beautiful, talented, smart, that I instantly developed a huge crush on her. But I was shy and awkward, so I knew my chances were close to zero. I kept my feelings to myself and would occasionally check out her social media and attend events where she performed, but she had no idea I existed. One day, I decided to contact her anonymously. I set up a fake account and started chatting with her. We talked about shows, books, and poetry, and I wished her luck for her upcoming exams. She was surprised and asked how I knew about her exams. I told her I went to the same university and then ended the conversation. I felt guilty for approaching her this way and didn't reveal my identity. A few weeks later, I was checking her social media again and saw a post where she referred to me as her secret admirer. I felt excited, thinking there might be a chance. So I finally decided to confess my feelings with my real profile. I got turned down. She gave me a reason that felt like an excuse, and her words hurt. I thought, she liked me as an anonymous guy, but not when she knew who I really was. It crushed me, but I decided to move on. The next 2 years were incredibly painful. Every time I saw her or her friends on campus, I felt like I was dying inside. I deleted my social media to avoid stalking her and focused on improving myself. I quit gaming, cut out bad habits, and tried to be a better person. During my last days at university, a piece I had written for a blog gained some attention, and she was one of the people who reached out to compliment it. We started talking again, and she confessed that she had feelings for me. She even brought up how I had a crush on her back then. I reminded her that she turned me down, and she responded, "Yeah, but it's not like you kept trying or anything." That's when I realized she was just a person, like everyone else. I had spent too long putting her on a pedestal. Looking back, I'm glad I didn't get the chance to date her. That experience changed my outlook on life. Now I focus on loving myself first and doing what makes me happy. Story 24. The guy was really good looking, and I didn't realize he was a creep at first. We worked together, and I'd heard stories about him, but I dismissed them, thinking the girl was exaggerating. I was also on the rebound. It didn't take long to see the truth. He had serious psychological issues. There were moments when I genuinely feared what could happen, but he was so charming that I questioned myself. He was paranoid and often accused me of lying to him or having crushes on other guys. He'd yell at me over nothing, even in public, and once a coworker asked what I did to make him so mad. He would take me to secluded places where we were completely alone, which felt unsettling. While he never physically hurt me, the emotional toll was enormous. He was a master at gaslighting and emotional manipulation. I'm grateful we stopped talking, and I'll never put myself in that kind of situation again. I learned to have empathy for people in abusive relationships because, while he never hit me, he was still very emotionally abusive. I stayed in that relationship for 9 months, and it was a tough lesson to learn. Story 26. I was labeled a creep in my school days. I was quite different from other people and had major confidence issues, mainly due to physical and emotional abuse I was going through. There was also an incident in 8th grade where a cheerleader pretended to like me for a week as a joke. Despite all of this, I would never have done the kinds of things that others have described here. The few relationships I had in my teens and 20s ended amicably, and I didn't stalk any of them. In fact, I'd say I'm still friendly with the 2 women I dated seriously in high school and college. I wasn't perfect, though. I had a strong S-drive, and yes, I did look at skirts in junior high. Short skirts were in fashion in the mid-'80s. But I wasn't anywhere near as bad as some of the guys people talk about here. Yet, I still got lumped in with them, and that, among other things, destroyed my confidence in future. I'm now 50, still single, and haven't been on a date in over 13 years. I make a decent living, enough to live on my own and afford nice computer gear. My car is paid for. I've always thought I could have been a good husband, but apparently no one else agreed. Story 27. He asked me out, and I politely said no because I wasn't looking for a partner. He accepted that, and we would talk occasionally since he seemed lonely. Most of our conversations revolved around horses, a shared interest, and I avoided any personal or relationship talk. Sometimes he said things that were really inappropriate, but I brushed it off as social awkwardness. A couple of months later, he came into the pub with a friend who was extremely obnoxious. His friend made loud jokes about date-related violence, which made me very uncomfortable. I kept telling him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. I went to the washroom and told him that if he didn't get it out of his system, I'd sit with other friends. He eventually stopped, but things got weird after that. The guy told my friends that I wasn't feeling well and that he'd take care of me. Everything after that is blurry, and I won't go into the details. Let's just say I was harmed physically, and at one point, I felt like my body wasn't under my control. I heard a crack in my spine and blacked out. The police didn't take any action. The incident left me with a severe back injury. My L4-5 vertebrae were damaged, and I now walk with a cane. I can't ride horses or do many of the activities I used to love. I don't feel safe anymore. Story 28. I was considered the creep. I've always been awkward around women, and my dates often ended with them ghosting me. This left me feeling desperate and depressed because I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. I used to try and keep conversations going, even when it was clear the other person wasn't interested. Dating sites were rough, and being under 5'9" inches didn't help. One day, I was in a chat room and started talking to someone I thought was a guy. That made it easier for me to be myself. After a few weeks, they revealed they were actually a girl, and that's when I started to act creepy. She didn't block me, but she told me that the things I was saying weren't okay and helped me understand how to be less awkward. We ended up meeting in person as friends, and she had a boyfriend at the time. Over the next few years, I continued to go on unsuccessful dates and still acted awkward, but she stayed in my life. 3 years later, her father passed away, and her boyfriend cheated on her. She was going through a tough time and didn't want to be intimate because of her depression. She had nowhere to go, so I let her move in with me as a friend. 6 weeks later, we became friends with benefits. Her grandmother got sick, and while we were visiting her in the hospital, she mentioned how cute we were as a couple. A few days later, her grandmother passed, and we attended the funeral together. After about a month, we officially became a couple, and it was the happiest I'd ever been. Now, 5 years later, we're expecting a daughter. I'm no longer the awkward guy I used to be. I've even had women approach and flirt with me, but I would never cheat on her. She's changed my life for the better, and I'm grateful every day. Story 29. This happened about 15 years ago, when I was 23. The guy in question was 20. I met him through a friend at a bar, and after about an hour of chatting, he asked me out. I was in a long-distance relationship at the time, so I politely declined and told him I was taken. He seemed really down after that, and started telling me how lonely he was and how nice I was. He asked if we could just be friends. I felt sorry for him, so I agreed to hang out as friends. We spent some time together, and during that time, he kept sharing sad stories about his past, claiming that his exes were abusive and his friends treated him terribly. He acted like I was the only person who cared about him. One day, he tried to kiss me, but I reminded him that I had a boyfriend and that we were just friends. Things escalated quickly after that. He started showing up at my workplace, hanging around outside the store for hours. He would call me and ask when I'd be free until I finally agreed to meet him. He followed me home to protect me and began showing up at my house unannounced. He told my friends that we were in a relationship, even though we weren't, and that I was leaving my boyfriend for him, which wasn't true. I tried reasoning with him and calling out his behavior, but he kept saying that he was in love with me, and love makes people do crazy things. The final straw came when he sent my boyfriend a long email, claiming we were soulmates, and that I secretly loved him. He detailed all the things he was going to do to me, whether I wanted them or not. My boyfriend forwarded me the email and told me to go to the police, but I still felt bad for the guy. Instead, I printed out the email and went to his house to confront him. He cried, begging for one last kiss, even though there hadn't been a first kiss. As he was pleading, his mom came home. I handed her the printed email without a word and left. He blew up my phone for a few days after that, but I never saw him again. He popped up in my People You May Know list on Facebook about 7 years ago, and I blocked him immediately. Story 30. I got a message out of the blue from a complete stranger. It went something like, "Hey, random question, but were you a waitress at old job?" I was intrigued but cautious. His profile looked legit. He'd had it since 2009, had plenty of friends, none mutual, and some posts. So I replied, yes, kinda. I hosted and waited. I'm guessing I waited on you? He responded, well, not exactly. You were someone else's waitress, but I couldn't take my eyes off you. I wanted to give you my number back then, but I chickened out. I'm visiting family here, and you popped up on my people you should know. I figured it was fate, so here's my number. XX. I was suspicious. The way he talked and his profile photo felt off, almost soulless, like maybe a bad situation waiting to happen. I showed my sisters and friends the messages and the photo, and while they said it could be creepy, they also said it was kind of cute. I should have listened to my gut, but I didn't. I agreed to go on a daytime date for buy one get one mules at a pub, where I knew some of the bartenders, just in case anything happened. It should have been coffee, but he wasn't a coffee drinker, and I figured a daytime drink would be fine. Right away, I noticed he wouldn't make eye contact and talked really fast, so I couldn't get a word in for about 30-45 minutes. By then, I'd already finished my drinks because I wasn't talking, and that was a mistake. When I finally got a chance to speak, he interrupted saying, "Is this real life? Am I really here with you?" Then he poked me and said, "Just making sure this is real. You're sitting across from me, right?" All while still avoiding eye contact. He even put a menu over my face saying I was too beautiful to be real. It was terrifying and I was getting drunk. I excused myself to the restroom, hoping to find someone I knew bartending, but I didn't. My phone had also died. I walked back out and said I was done, but a round of drinks was already being delivered. I stupidly felt bad and drank it. As I tried to leave, he kept following me, saying he'd follow me home. He was still acting like the date wasn't real, poking and pinching himself in me. Eventually, a loud commotion broke out at another table, and I said I wanted to check it out. I also asked for the check, but his card didn't work, so I paid. He then kept pestering me for my Venmo info, getting more frustrated each time. Luckily, I spotted someone I knew and went over to talk to her. I introduced myself to the group she was with, trying to stay away from this guy. They were super nice and helped me out. When he went to the bathroom, I told him I was scared and trying to get away. We devised a plan to leave for another bar without him, but unfortunately, someone mentioned where we were going, so he followed. He even kissed me on the head and made a comment about how I seemed uncomfortable. I told him I was, and he laughed. When I got to the next bar, he kept trying to buy me drinks, even though I was drinking sparkling water to sober up. At one point, I overheard him talking to a girl, telling her that I was his date. I owed him, and he was sure he'd get what he wanted. She agreed. I told the group what I heard, and we planned to leave when he went for a smoke break. But as I headed to my car, still a little drunk, I realized I couldn't drive. So I jumped into the back seat and hid under a bunch of clothes. He found my car half an hour later and started banging on the windows, threatening to break them if I didn't open the door. I was scared and told him I didn't know him and wanted to go home. He insisted on calling me an Uber and demanded my address. I gave him a fake one and got into the Uber, telling the driver the truth. Thankfully, the driver took me home. A year later, I got a text from an unknown number with a glitchy video of me from that night, clearly taken from his jacket. When I confronted him, he acted confused and tried to convince me to be friends. I blocked him again, and hopefully that's the end of it. Story 31. I met this guy online while I was separating from my ex-husband. He asked me out before I had even announced the separation, and when I told him to stop, he did, for a bit. He would still ask me out occasionally. After I was officially separated and going through the divorce process, I mentioned I was going to see a movie, not to him directly, and he asked if I minded company. I said sure, but made it clear I wasn't ready to date. We went to lunch, saw the movie, and even grabbed dinner. It was a nice time and there was no pressure. A couple of months later, he invited me to another movie, and again we had a nice time. I still wasn't ready to date, and he knew this because I kept reminding him. I just wanted friends since my ex had driven all mine away. A few weeks later, after a really bad week, he asked me to dinner. It was late, and he wanted me to drive an hour to meet him. I initially said no, but he was persistent, so I agreed. I tried to meet halfway, but he insisted on his favorite place, a cheesy chain steakhouse, knowing I was allergic to red meat. The entire night, he was rude and talked only about himself. He even tried to order a steak for me, then dessert I didn't want. It was exhausting, and I just wanted to go home. On the way back to my car, he kept pestering me to stay longer and watch a movie. I refused, but he was visibly irritated. He tried to hug me goodbye, but I brushed him off. When I got home, I found out he had been ranting in our group chat about how I was a liar and a tease because I wouldn't sleep with him. He twisted a conversation we had a year prior, where I said I don't do one-night stands and never sleep with someone before a third date. He apparently thought this was our third date. He went on, but my friends shut him down. I blocked him after that, but he would still call me names in the chat until he eventually got banned. Story 32. This is about a girl I dated in high school. Everyone knew she was a bit strange, but we had a couple of classes together and I thought she was cute, so I gave her a chance. We were together for a few months, but she constantly threatened to harm herself if I left her. She also forced herself on me whenever we were alone. After we broke up, she spent over a year telling the school's guidance counselors and teachers that I had harmed her during our relationship. She also claimed that I was harassing her afterward, which wasn't true. The school had to contact the police, but I was close with a few teachers, and there was no evidence of harassment, so nothing came of it. In our last semester of high school, she posted on a website pretending to be me, saying I wanted to be hurt. She even doxed me. She later cheated on her new partner with their best friend, but they stayed together anyway. Story 33. He was funny, well-educated, and had young children, but he had an odd side that I thought was due to his ongoing divorce. We dated for a couple of months, but he kept ending things because of his kids and his ex being upset, only to text me later, saying he missed me. I eventually ended it because things were becoming chaotic. Afterward, he started calling and texting nonstop. He left letters on my car and sent flowers and balloons to my workplace. When I blocked him, he messaged my sister on a dating app and had his friends message me on Facebook. Years later, I would still occasionally get messages from his friends. 4 years after we dated, he messaged someone I barely knew through Facebook, trying to get to me. Thankfully, she had a sense of humor and responded to him, helping me cut him off for good. Story 35. I agreed to friendly drinks after work and made it clear that a relationship wasn't really in the cards for me at the moment. He said he understood. Fast forward about 2 weeks later, and he bit my thigh when I tried to avoid his advances, leaving a large bruise. He then tried to block me from leaving his house, but I managed to get out. By the next morning, he had left me 18 voicemails saying he was in love with me and that he had left the bruise on purpose so other men wouldn't want me. He threatened to do it again to prove his love. He even made threats towards my family, saying I didn't understand what love was. I reported him to my workplace, which got him fired, and then contacted the police. He sent me a string of messages blaming me for ruining his life, and then disappeared for a while. He's back in town now, and even though it's been 4 years, he still talks about how wronged he was for being reported to any mutual friends he sees at bars. Story 36. This happened in the mid-1990s. I had just ended a 5-year relationship and wasn't interested in dating again right away. But a friend of mine told me about a guy she had chatted with online, who was my age and was about to move to our city for work. She convinced me to give him a chance. I gave him my phone number, and for the next couple of nights, he'd call me after I got home from work. But one evening, when I didn't come home straight after work, he left a nasty message on my answering machine asking where I was. That didn't sit well with me. I enjoyed staying out late with friends, and I wasn't going to let someone I hadn't even met dictate my lifestyle. He started demanding to know where I was going and told me I should stop going out late, saying, "I don't want you out late anymore. You'll start coming home by 10. When I told him he had no right to control my life, he got furious, called me insulting names, and wished harm upon me. Another woman I knew ended up dating him after he moved to the city, but things didn't go well for her either. He pressured her for things she wasn't comfortable with and wouldn't leave her apartment afterward. Her brother and his friends had to get him to leave. After that, I lost track of him, but he was definitely bad news. Story 37. I gave my friend's husband a chance to talk to me about their marital issues. Even though I had always had a bad feeling about him, my partner was friends with him, and my friend wouldn't tell me exactly what their problems were, just that they wanted to see other people. The husband asked to come over to talk, so I agreed to meet him outside for a walk. But when he arrived, he ended up talking his way into my apartment, claiming he had nowhere else to go. He pulled out a box of wine from his backpack and tried to get me to drink, which I refused. At some point, when I went to use the restroom, he grabbed me and tackled me onto the bed. I managed to escape and repeatedly asked him to leave. It took him about 30 minutes to let go of me, after which I had to physically push him out and lock the door. The next day, he texted to apologize, but I told him I never wanted to speak to him again and blocked his number. Later, I found out he had been abusing my friend. I helped her get out of that marriage, but I moved to another city, and still fear running into him. I'll never ignore my intuition again. Story 38. I was really young, a freshman in college, and didn't have much experience socializing because I grew up isolated and was often bullied. When a much older classmate showed interest in me, he was very forceful and made me uncomfortable. Despite my unease, I felt pressured by my classmates to be nice to him. One night he managed to trap me in his car and forcibly kissed me. He held my face so tightly I couldn't move, then threw my phone and bag aside so I couldn't reach them. He pinned me down, but luckily my phone started ringing nonstop, which caused him to get frustrated and throw me out of the car. For the next 3 years, I avoided him. I would drop classes if he was in them, leave restaurants if he showed up, and take different routes on campus to avoid running into him. He was in the military, and his temper scared me, especially after I saw him lose it on a homeless veteran once. Story 39. After ending an emotionally abusive relationship with a bad boy type, I decided to give a nice guy a chance. He was an older, well-put-together law student who lived in the same complex where I worked. Our first date was fine, but he seemed too interested in marriage, and I wasn't ready for anything serious. Despite that, I agreed to a second date. The next day, he offered to give me a ride home. I didn't realize until too late that he had driven us far away from my house and onto the freeway. He reassured me we were going to his apartment for a quick detour. Inside, he began talking about marriage and how beautiful I was. And I noticed that the car doors were child-locked. I played along, pretending to be interested, so he would drive me home. As soon as we got close to my house, I jumped out of the car and ran. The next day, I called off the date and told him he had scared me. He became angry, saying I had made a mistake and hung up on me. Months later, I ran into him again, and he bragged that he was getting married to someone from overseas. Story 40. Knew this dude through mutual friends. We had a regular bi-weekly board game night and would rotate houses, so I knew he was a creep, but felt relatively safe around him. After like 5 failed attempts, I acquiesced, but told him it would have to be a quick bite since I was fostering some kittens. He picked me up. Big mistake. And we went to Chipotle. It was a normal enough conversation, and the ride home was even pleasant. When we got to my place, I told him he could come in for a beer, that he'd actually left at my place the previous game night I hosted to chat while I bottle-fed 4 kittens. It's important to note that at the time, I was technically less than 2 months post-chemo, so my energy levels were not exactly normal. I tried talking, but eventually I literally fell asleep on my spare bedroom floor where I'd been feeding the kittens. I woke up the next morning to him making coffee in my kitchen. Super weird, since I hate even the smell of coffee and lived alone, thus had no coffee or coffee pot. He nonchalantly tells me he picked one up last night after I fell asleep and was going to make me the best coffee ever. I politely but sternly told him he needed to leave, like immediately, and take the coffee and pot with him. I was extremely firm, bordering on indignant, so I thought it was strange that he seemed to be totally cool with my GTFO statement. Later that day, I get a text from a mutual friend, another gamer, who just said, well, that's hella creepy, confused. I looked at my missed texts and see a group chat thread where he's posted a photo of me from the night before, asleep on my floor, and he wrote, "This is why I love this woman, beautiful inside and out, not to mention a great date." I was shocked even more when he posted it on FB, and a woman I assume was his mom commented, "So happy for you, can't wait to meet her." I sent him a text and said, "Delete any photos you took of me unconscious or otherwise, and FYI, I am blocking your number because you are way over the line." Kind of fractured our game nights, but I didn't care as long as I never saw him again. He did for a few years leave me random gifts on my porch or would try to contact me from different numbers. He is most likely reading this right now, so Leo, if you get the F over it, it was one shitty meal at Chipotle. I'm not the one who got away or your Fing soulmate. I have so many weird things he said to me when we hung out that I really should have known better. Story 41. This was in high school. They're a guy that was really not a bad guy, but everyone would make fun of him because he was nerdy. Back then, nerdy and wasn't as cool as it is today. People called him a creepin' tube baby because the rumor spread that he wasn't born by natural means. Anywho, he was alone at lunch and stuff, and I was also a very solitary person, so gave him a chance. I was lonely as well and didn't want to judge him based on what others say. Sat with him, had nice conversations, and he was a cool guy. He was strange, but he wasn't an asshole or anything like that. Well, he began stalking me at school. He was there right when I was out of every class, followed me to talk to me on every hallway, and even when I had to go to the bathroom, "Go on so you're not late to your own class." He waited. Eventually, I had a talk with him and told him that I liked seeing him, etc., but that he needed to stop following me all the time. He didn't deny it. He apologized and went home. Cue the next day. He's not following me. Great, I thought. We had lunch and didn't see him for the rest of the day. I get home and my mom calls me over and tells me that a boy came over from school to hang out, like we both planned. No conversation remotely close came to have any misunderstandings, and that he is waiting for me in my room. Now we talked in school, but I never shared where I lived or anything remotely personal. This dude at some point probably stalked me heading home. That mixed with the fact that he was currently in my room alone for some time, especially frightening, since this took place the day after we had our conversation. Before I got home was such an invasion of privacy that, boy, I lost it then and there. I didn't give him a chance to talk. I pulled a dentist from IASIP and slammed the door open, terrifying him, and told him to get the F out and that the friendship is done. And what was he thinking? He just grabbed his stuff and left crying. Never saw him again. Last I heard after that event, he transferred to another school. So yeah, the sad thing is that before the stalking, he was a really nice dude. And I know that in time, it could have potentially been something more, but he messed up bad. So I told myself that from then on, I'm not giving potential creeps any chances. Story 42. Dated online. Long distance. He was a mutual friend of others in our community and they all attested to his character, etc. So I thought, okay, he's cute. What have I got to lose? Cue a month later, he's constantly getting high and or drunk. And when I tried to end things as gently as I possibly could, he threatened to blow his head off with a shotgun. And if I tried to message his family or someone he knew to try and help him, he would only do it faster. Ended up with a bunch of our friends having to talk him down for hours till he calmed down. And I woke up the next day to messages from friends saying they blamed me for the whole thing. Felt like absolute shit for a long time after that. Lost a lot of mutual friends. Another guy, not long distance this time, but I missed so many red flags at the time. Hindsight is 20/20ths. He showed up at my place for the weekend to surprise me without telling me he was coming over till he was basically 5 minutes away. And I felt like I couldn't tell him to go back. He acted like I should be over the moon that he showed up for me out of the blue without even checking if I already had plans or just wasn't wanting him to come over that time. It felt like a huge disregard for boundaries, and the absolute nail in the coffin was when I begrudgingly went to TJ's store with him later in the day and he threw a childish tantrum because I wouldn't buy him Cheetos. Yep, Cheetos. Absolute man baby. I broke up with him like a week later. I've since established much healthier boundaries for myself and people I let into my life and my circle and can spot a red flag a mile off like a sniffer dog, so I guess it wasn't all a total waste of time if I learned something. Story 43. Mine is not nearly as bad as some, but it still made me very uncomfortable. I worked in a food distribution warehouse as a picker over the summer while school was out a few years ago. I told some of my colleagues that I was going to nursing school and would be leaving in late August when we were talking about warehouse problems, mostly staffing. They said a few guys were interested in me, to which I was like, huh? And to maybe give them a chance, because you never know if you'll find the one and end up married. Really was put off, but thought nothing of it because I was pretty firm not to date anyone from there because I was by far the youngest at 19 and knew better and was leaving for school anyway. I think 3 guys asked for my number, and I made clear to them other guys had too, but I was only looking for friendship and not a partner. I didn't want to, but one of them really pressured me into it, and I went on a date with them to a waffle place IARC, but told them all I still really wasn't interested. Him and one other guy respected that, but the third did not. The third guy started texting me about how he thought about me all his shift and asking me to call him after I got off work and was driving home. He tried to convince me to take gifts from him and go out on a date since I'd been giving other guys a chance and not him. Got gradually more uncomfortable with him constantly complimenting me, so I kept trying to cut off communication. He then one night started to talk about how my butt did have him looking the first couple of times in the warm room, direct words from his texts, and he just didn't want to lie and act like he hadn't looked at least once. I told him it made me uncomfortable. Edit. Spelling. We worked in the refrigerated section of the warehouse, which was frequently 20, 30 degrees, so I'd wear sweatpants and a jacket. Because the warm room where bananas and some veggies was about 60, I'd get warm running around and take my jacket off and put it around my waist. He would call me pet names like gorgeous and beautiful, though I told him to stop. Said he hated never seeing me with my mask off and out of formal clothes. He'd frequently send 5 or so messages back to back when I ignored him about how he's sorry he's pestering me. At work, he'd be rather distant, but the texts were much different. After he again derided how he'll never have a shot with me, no matter how much he complimented me, I just didn't respond, and that was that. Luckily, never heard from him again. Whole ordeal was probably 3 weeks long. I was young and didn't think to report him, but I'm just glad I trusted my gut to not go out with him. Nothing horrible came from it, but a lesson to not be afraid to block creeps. Story 44. Blind date. When I was first started dating and parents happened to be by the front door, he was walking up. They both asked me to not go with him and said they would tell him I was sick. They are certainly not ones to make excuses for us. And this was literally from just watching him approach the house that the vibes he gave off. I thought they were being ridiculous and just being that way because it was maybe the second guy I dated. Hung out with another couple and things were fine, but we were not clicking at all. No red flags, just everything was awkward. No biggie. The four of us went back to my date's house. Parents were not home. Other couple immediately starts getting hot and heavy on the couch. It was his friends, and this was obviously planned. More awkwardness. Naive me agreed to go to his room to listen to music. No chairs, only a bed. Great. But we sat there listening to music and talking, and things started going smoother. Out of nowhere, he practically jumps on me and starts kissing me and groping. Needless to say, I wasn't having any of that. Took several tries, but pushed him off. He got mad. I left. He kept calling and showed up one time. I was not home. My mom, who again never ever made excuses for me, told him to take a hint and leave me alone. I didn't tell her what happened, but she didn't like him. 2 years later, he was waiting trial for rapping 3 girls. 2 had not come forward because it was date rape, and frankly, this was the ADS. Date rape was really not recognized yet. 3rd one was 14 years old. Neighbor, apparently. He went to jail.